Dr. Alan Price stared at his computer screen, his eyes red from lack of sleep. The midnight shift at the SETI facility in New Mexico was usually quiet. For 15 years, he had searched the stars for signs of intelligent life. For 15 years, he had found nothing. Until now. The coffee mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. He didn't notice. His attention was locked on the pattern scrolling across his monitor, a signal unlike anything he had ever seen. "This can't be right," he whispered to the empty room. He ran the standard checks to rule out equipment malfunction. The signal remained. He checked for terrestrial interference. Nothing. The pattern continued, perfect and precise, coming from a point near Alpha Centauri. With shaking hands, he reached for the phone and called his boss. 2 hours later, the small, monitoring room was packed with scientists. Dr. Susan Bradley, head of signal analysis, pushed her way to the front. "Is it real?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the excited chatter. Alan nodded. "It's real, and there's more. The pattern contains data, a lot of data. It's a message, Susan." The facility director ordered the message decoded immediately. Teams of cryptographers and linguists worked around the clock. The basic mathematical structure was easy to understand. The aliens had designed it that way, using universal constants as a foundation. The content, however, took 3 days to fully translate. When they finally understood what it said, the room fell silent. "We need to call the president," the facility director said quietly. The message wasn't a greeting. It wasn't an invitation to join a galactic community or an offer of advanced technology. It was a warning. A massive empire called the Galactic. Hegemony had marked Earth for what they called preemptive pacification. In simple terms, invasion and conquest. The reason they gave was chilling. Humanity's combination of rapid technological growth and violent tendencies made them an unacceptable risk to galactic peace. The attack would come in exactly 1 year, 365 Earth days. But the warning hadn't come from the hegemony itself. It came from a group that called themselves the Preservers, a small faction within the Empire who believed all intelligent species deserved a chance to determine their own fate. Alan sat in the briefing room as government officials arrived from Washington. FBI agents secured the facility. Military personnel set up a perimeter. The small SETI station, once ignored and underfunded, had become the most important place on Earth overnight. "Can we trust this warning?" asked General Frank Porter, his uniform crisp despite having flown in directly from the Pentagon. Dr. Bradley pointed to the screen where the technical data from the message displayed. "The signal contains detailed specifications of their technology, their ships, weapons, and the method they'll use to enter our solar system. It even includes biological data on several of the species in the hegemony. No human could have created this." "Why would these preservers warn us?" asked a woman in a dark suit who hadn't introduced herself. "What do they gain?" Alan cleared his throat. "According to the message, they believe in something they call the diversity principle, the idea that the universe benefits from having many different types of intelligent life developing in different ways. They're risking their own safety to warn us." "Can they help us fight?" asked the general. "No," Alan said. "They made that clear. Any direct interference would trigger immediate extinction-level retaliation against both Earth and their own worlds. The warning is all they can offer." Within days, the news spread worldwide. Governments released carefully worded statements confirming contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, followed by the grim details of the warning. The initial reaction was predictable: panic, disbelief, religious fervor, conspiracy theories. Stock markets crashed. Some people fled to remote areas. Others partied like the world was ending. But something unexpected happened next. As the reality sank in, people began to come together. In Washington, D.C., President Karen Morrison stood before the United Nations General Assembly. Every seat was filled. Not a single nation had declined to attend. "We face the greatest threat in human history," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. For the first time, we truly understand that our differences, our borders, our conflicts, our old hatreds, mean nothing in the face of extinction. We have 1 year. 1 year to prepare for an invasion by a technologically superior force. She paused, looking at the assembled representatives. We cannot match them in technology, but perhaps we don't need to. Perhaps what we need is to show them who we really are, not just our capacity for violence, but our capacity for growth, for cooperation, for change. Around the world, people watched her speech, in bars and living rooms, in town squares and refugee camps, on ships at sea and research stations in Antarctica. For once, all of humanity listened to the same message at the same time. Back at the SETI facility, Alan and Susan worked with international teams to analyze every piece of data from the warning. The hegemony's ships would arrive through a controlled, spatial distortion at the edge of the solar system. The invasion fleet would consist of approximately 300 vessels of varying sizes, primarily automated with minimal biological crew presence. One night, after 18 hours of non-stop work, Alan stared at the technical specifications. Something clicked in his mind. A possibility, wild and dangerous. "Susan," he said slowly, "what if we could control where they arrive?" She looked up from her own work, exhaustion clear on her face. "What do you mean?" "The spatial distortion they use. It's similar to theories our physicists have been working on. What if we could interfere with it? Not prevent them from coming, but change where they appear in our solar system." "To what end?" "So we can ambush them?" Susan asked. "We'd still be outmatched." Alan shook his head, excitement building. "No, not for an ambush, for something they would never expect." He pulled up a map of Earth on his screen. "What if we bring them here, directly above us, and show them something that changes their minds about humanity?" Susan stared at him. "You're suggesting we help our invaders arrive and then what? Talk to them?" "Not just talk," Alan said, a plan forming in his mind. "Show them, all of us, the truth of who we are, the good and the bad, the real humanity." Susan was quiet for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "They're expecting war like savages. Let's show them something different." She reached for the phone. "We need to call the president again. I think we have an idea." 100 days passed since the warning. The world had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Colonel Jack Howard stood at the window of the new United Earth Defense Force headquarters in Geneva. Below him, people from dozens of nations worked together, their former conflicts set aside in the face of extinction. Jack, once a United States Air Force pilot, now commanded soldiers from countries he had once been trained to fight. "Sir," a voice called from behind him. "The latest satellite reports are ready." Jack turned to face Lieutenant Olivia Chen, formerly of the Chinese military. 6 months ago, they would have regarded each other with suspicion. Now they were comrades. "How are the orbital platforms coming along?" Jack asked, walking with her. "To the command center. We're at 60% completion," Olivia replied. "They won't stop an invasion, but they'll make a statement." The command center hummed with activity. On the main screen, a map of Earth showed green dots representing defense projects around the globe. Not weapons, at least, not conventional, ons. These were something else entirely. "Colonel Howard," a voice called out. Dr. Susan Bradley hurried across the room, Dr. Alan Price at her side. "We need to show you something." They led Jack to a secure room where a holographic display showed the detailed schematics of Project Echo. Based on the technical data from the alien warning, they had designed a device to interfere with the spatial distortion technology the hegemony would use to arrive in our solar system. "We've successfully tested the prototype," Alan said proudly. "On a small scale, of course." Susan pointed to the display. "We can't stop them from coming, but we can control exactly where they appear." Jack studied the schematics. "And the ideal location would be?" "Here." Susan highlighted a point directly above Hiroshima, Japan. "For reasons that should be obvious." Jack nodded slowly. "The place where humans first used atomic weapons against other humans." the symbol of both our destructive capacity and our ability to rebuild and forgive. He looked at the scientists. But what good does it do us to control where they arrive? They'll still have overwhelming military superiority. Alan smiled. That's where the second part of our plan comes in. In the months since the warning, the old borders of nations still existed on maps, but they had become little more than administrative boundaries. Resources flowed freely. Scientists shared discoveries that would have once been military secrets. Soldiers trained together in mixed units. But the most remarkable changes happened among ordinary people. In Nebraska, farmer Pete Miller opened his grain silos to feed communities preparing for potential food shortages. In Russia, families opened their homes to those working on defense projects. In Kenya, village elders organized young people to help build community shelters, not out of fear, but out of solidarity. Commander Lisa Wright, head of the newly formed Space Command, sat in a conference room at NASA headquarters with Jack, Susan, and Alan. On the table between them lay the detailed plans for humanity's response to the hegemony. "Let me get this straight," Lisa said, her voice skeptical. "We're going to help the aliens arrive directly above Earth, and then what? Ask them nicely not to kill us?" "Not exactly," Alan replied. "We're going to show them something they don't expect." Susan opened a laptop and showed them the designs. "We've been coordinating with artists, landscapers, and volunteers worldwide. When the hegemony arrives, they'll see this." The screen displayed a massive work of land art covering 20 square miles outside Hiroshima. When completed, it would be visible from orbit. Scenes from human history, formed by careful landscaping, painted structures, and millions of people standing in formation. "It tells our whole story," Susan explained. "Our wars, yes, but also our healing, our cruelty, but also our compassion. The truth about humanity, all of it." Lisa frowned. "And you think this will stop an invasion fleet?" "No," Jack said quietly. "But it might make them think, and while they're thinking, we implement Phase 2. The next day, Jack addressed the combined forces under his command. Soldiers from 194 nations stood at attention, wearing uniforms that carried both their national flags and the new emblem of Earth, a simple blue circle. "The hegemony expects us to either surrender or fight conventionally," he told them. We'll do neither. Each of you has been chosen not just for your military skills, but for your ability to communicate, to understand, to represent the best of your cultures. You will be the honor guard of humanity." Meanwhile, in orbiting space stations, astronauts from 17 nations worked to complete the defense platforms. These weren't weapon systems. They were communication arrays, designed to broadcast Earth's message to the arriving fleet in every possible format and frequency. On the ground, communities prepared in unusual ways. Schools didn't run disaster drills. Instead, children created artwork and messages for the aliens. Museums carefully selected artifacts that represented human achievement and set them up in open areas. Orchestras practiced pieces that mathematically represented human emotion in ways that alien minds might comprehend. In Dallas, Texas, 10-year-old Billy Carter had his own idea. He stood before his school assembly, nervous but determined. "We need to show them our future," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Not just who we were, or who we are, but who we might become." With his teacher's help, Billy organized his entire school to create a time capsule. Other schools heard about the project and joined in. Soon, children across the planet were collecting items that represented their hopes for the future. "In case they don't understand us," Billy told a reporter, who came to cover the story, "maybe they'll understand what we dream about." Back at Project Echo headquarters beneath the Nevada desert, Susan and Alan worked day and night to perfect their technology. The device had to work perfectly the first time. There would be no second chance. "Do you think this will actually work?" Susan asked late one night when exhaustion had lowered her usual guard. Alan looked up from his calculations. "Honestly, I don't know. But I know this, in trying to save ourselves, we've already changed ourselves. Look at what humanity has accomplished in just a few months when we work together." Susan nodded. "Even if we fail, we've proven something important." "We won't fail," Alan said with sudden conviction. The hegemony thinks they're dealing with primitive warmongers. They have no idea what humans are capable of when united. As the day of arrival grew closer, final preparations were made. The land art near Hiroshima was completed. The orbital platforms were fully operational. Project Echo was ready. 3 days before the expected arrival, Jack Howard met with President Karen Morrison and the newly formed Global Council, leaders from every nation on Earth. Everything is in place, Jack reported. The question is, do we proceed with this plan? It's not too late to attempt a more conventional defense. President Morrison looked around the table at the assembled leaders. We've come this far together. We've accomplished what many thought impossible. I say we trust in who we've become. One by one, the leaders nodded their agreement. Then it's decided, she said. When the hegemony arrives, we will show them the true face of humanity, not just our strength but our spirit. As Jack left the meeting, his communicator beeped. It was a message from the orbital tracking station. The void between stars was shifting. Something was coming. The day of arrival dawned with strange calm across the planet. After a year of preparation, there was nothing left to do but wait. Dr. Alan Price stood in the command center beneath the Nevada desert, staring at the main screen. Satellite feeds showed the vast artwork outside Hiroshima, completed just days ago. From space, it would appear as a massive mural, scenes of human history etched into the landscape. Wars and peace treaties, destruction and rebuilding, the honest story of humanity, beautiful and terrible all at once. It's time, Dr. Susan Bradley said quietly beside him. Colonel Jack Howard nodded to the communications officer. Broadcast, the signal. Around the world, every television, radio, and internet connection carried the same message. Today we stand together. Today we face our future. In orbit, the defense platforms activated. Not weapon systems, but powerful transmitters ready to communicate with the arriving fleet in every conceivable format. Commander Lisa Wright floated in the command module of the largest platform, her eyes fixed on the detection equipment. Movement detected at the edge of the solar system, reported her second-in-command. Exactly where and when they said they would arrive. Lisa took a deep breath. All stations report. One by one, the platform commanders checked in. Everyone was ready. Here they come, someone whispered. At the edge of the solar system, space itself seemed to fold. A cascade of light burst into existence as the first hegemony ships emerged from their spatial distortion. They were massive. The smallest was larger than any spacecraft humans had ever built, the largest nearly the size of Earth's moon. In observation centers around the planet, people watched in stunned silence. The ship's designs were alien, with curves and angles that seemed impossible, surfaces that shifted color as they moved, beautiful and terrifying at once. 312 vessels detected, reported the orbital tracking station, formation consistent with the warning data. In the Nevada command center, Jack looked at Alan. Now or never, Doctor. Alan nodded and turned to the Project Echo control station. The device they had built based on the alien technology was their one chance. If it failed, the invasion would proceed as planned. If it worked, activating Echo in 3, 2, 1. Deep beneath the desert, powerful generators hummed to life. The Echo device began to glow, its components spinning faster than the eye could follow. Energy readings spiked off the charts. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then at the edge of the solar system, the spatial distortion that had brought the hegemony fleet reopened. The alien ships caught in the distortion field were pulled back into it before they could activate their defensive systems. Did it work? Jack asked tensely. Alan's eyes were fixed on the readings. Wait for it. Directly above Hiroshima, space rippled. The distortion reopened, and the entire hegemony fleet materialized in high Earth orbit. Position confirmed, Susan shouted. They're exactly where we wanted them. The hegemony ships hung motionless in orbit, clearly disoriented by their unexpected arrival point. Their formation was broken, their planned approach disrupted. For precious minutes, they did nothing. Those minutes were all Earth needed. Below, the fleet. The massive artwork was clearly visible from orbit, but it wasn't static. Millions of people had gathered around it, forming living extensions of the design. Unarmed civilians from every nation stood shoulder to shoulder, looking up at the sky. In Hiroshima itself, survivors of the atomic bombing and their descendants stood in the Central Park, holding candles despite the daylight, a symbol of hope rising from humanity's darkest moment. "All communication arrays online," reported the signal officer, "broadcasting on all frequencies and formats from the warning data." Commander Wright's voice was steady as she began the transmission from orbit. "To the Galactic Hegemony Fleet. We received your warning. This is our response. We are humanity. We know what we are. We know what we have been. We invite you to witness what we can become." The message repeated in mathematical sequences, in visual patterns, in frequencies beyond human hearing, every possible way they could think to make the aliens understand. For 23 long minutes, the hegemony ships remained motionless, in orbit. No weapons activated, no smaller craft launched. The invasion fleet simply observed. In homes and gathering places around the world, people held their breath. Had it worked? Were they about to be destroyed? The waiting was almost worse than an attack would have been. In Billy Carter's school gymnasium in Dallas, his entire class sat together watching the live feed. Billy clutched the small time capsule he had made, filled with drawings of what he hoped to be when he grew up, an astronaut who would visit the stars in peace. "Why aren't they doing anything?" whispered his friend next to him. "Maybe they're thinking," Billy answered. "My mom says sometimes you need to think before you decide important things." In the Nevada Command Center, tension mounted with each passing minute. Military advisors urged preparation for conventional defense. Politicians demanded action, but Jack Howard remained calm. "We stick to the plan," he insisted. "We've shown them our past. Now we show them our potential future." At his signal, the second phase began. From launch sites around the world, thousands of small drones rose into the sky. Not weapons. Each carried a sample of human culture, art, music, literature, scientific achievements. The drones formed a spiral pattern as they ascended toward the alien fleet, a symbolic offering. At the same time, in orbit, the defense platforms began broadcasting the children's messages, billions of hopes and dreams from the youngest humans, translated into mathematical patterns. "Look," Susan pointed to the main screen. Several of the alien ships had begun to move. Smaller vessels detached from the larger craft and descended into the atmosphere. "Are they attacking?" someone asked nervously. "No," Alan said, studying the readings. "Their weapon systems are inactive. I think they're observing, collecting data." The smaller hegemony ships moved slowly through Earth's atmosphere. They scanned the massive artwork. They recorded the gathered crowds. They collected samples of air, water, soil. They observed cities and wilderness areas. Most surprisingly, they accepted the drones that approached them, taking the cultural offerings inside their vessels. In some locations, the ships descended all the way to the ground. When they did, volunteers approached them, unarmed, hands empty and open. No one knew if the aliens would communicate, or if they would simply destroy these brave individuals. Near the artwork in Hiroshima, an elderly survivor of the atomic bombing walked slowly toward one of the landed ships. The crowd held its breath. A door opened in the alien vessel. A figure emerged, not human, with too many limbs and eyes that covered much of its face. The two beings stood facing each other, separated by just a few feet and 78 years of history. Then, after 23 minutes of silence, a single communication arrived at every electronic device on Earth simultaneously. The message was just one word: explain. Explain. That single word echoed around the world. In the Nevada Command Center, Colonel Jack Howard looked at Dr. Alan Price and Dr. Susan Bradley. "This is what we prepared for," he said quietly. "Time for the conversation." For months, they had planned for this moment. Teams of linguists, Historians, philosophers, scientists, and ordinary citizens had been selected and trained. Now it was time to speak for Earth. In Hiroshima, the elderly survivor who had approached the alien ship spoke first. Her words were translated and broadcast globally. "I was 6 years old when the bomb fell," she said simply. "I lost my family. I should have hated those who did this to us. Many did. But hate only brings more suffering. Instead, I chose to remember, to forgive, and to hope that we would learn. This is what humans can do. We can change." Around the world, the chosen representatives began to speak. They didn't beg for mercy. They told the truth about humanity. Its violence and selfishness, yes, but also its compassion and growth. A historian from Mexico City named Maria Gonzalez stood before a landed alien craft in her city's main square. "Throughout our history, we have fought countless wars," she explained. "We have enslaved each other, we have damaged our own planet, but we have also freed slaves, healed our wounded, and begun to repair the damage we caused. We are not perfect, but we are learning." In the orbital command module, Commander Lisa Wright coordinated the communications. "Keep all channels open," she ordered. "Make sure they receive every transmission." The hegemony ships remained in position, their sensors scanning Earth continuously. After 12 hours, they responded. 7 different alien beings appeared as holographic projections in key locations around the planet. In the Nevada Command Center, one such being materialized, a creature with 4 arms and a head that seemed to be mostly eyes. It identified itself as the primary voice of the Hegemony Council. "You were warned of your destruction," it said, its words translated through the system developed from the warning data. "Yet you did not attempt to flee or to mount significant military defense. Instead, you created art, gathered unarmed. This is not rational behavior." Dr. Alan Price stepped forward. "It is precisely rational," he replied. "We understood we could not win a conventional war against you. So we chose to change the nature of the confrontation." Susan joined him. "You judged us based on our past and our potential for violence. We wanted to show you our potential for peace." The primary voice seemed genuinely confused. Its many eyes blinked in different patterns. The warning was not sent by the hegemony. It was sent by traitors. "Yes," Jack said, "but it gave us a chance to look at ourselves through your eyes and to show you who we truly are." For the next 2 days, the conversation continued. Representatives from Earth spoke directly with the Hegemony Council, their words translated and broadcast globally. Dr. Price and Dr. Bradley were among those chosen to explain the scientific aspects, while others addressed culture, history, ethics, and art. In schools across the planet, children watched and listened. In Billy Carter's classroom in Dallas, the teacher had set up a special communication link so the students could send their own messages to the aliens. "Dear space people," Billy wrote, "I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. I promise I will. Come visit you as a friend, not an enemy. Do you have kids too? What games do they play?" Thousands of similar messages flowed from children worldwide. The hegemony representatives seemed especially interested in these communications, spending hours reviewing them. On the second day, smaller hegemony vessels continued their exploration of Earth. They took samples of plants, animals, water, and air. They scanned buildings and monuments. Most importantly, they interviewed thousands of volunteers who had signed up to meet them. Some of the aliens seemed particularly drawn to Earth's art and music. In museums around the world, they spent hours examining paintings and sculptures. In concert halls, they listened to orchestras perform everything from classical symphonies to jazz and rock. In the Nevada Command Center, the primary voice asked Alan and Susan an unexpected question. "Your species shows remarkable adaptation in the face of extinction. Is this common behavior for humans?" Alan thought carefully before answering. "Throughout our history, we have often been at our best when facing our worst challenges. Great crises have brought out both terrible cruelty and extraordinary kindness. The warning you sent allowed us to choose which path to take." The alien was silent for a long moment. You used our technology against us. You redirected our fleet. We did, Susan admitted, but not to attack you, to show you something you might have missed if you had invaded as planned. On the third day, the primary voice addressed Earth again, this time in a global broadcast from the largest hegemony ship. All 7 council members stood together as their leader spoke. The Preserver's interference violated our protocols, it said, but their assessment was not incorrect. You are dangerous. You are unpredictable. The world held its breath, waiting for the sentence of destruction. But perhaps not in the way we anticipated, the primary voice continued. No species has ever responded as you have. This requires reconsideration. In the Nevada Command Center, Alan and Susan looked at each other, hardly daring to hope. The hegemony exists to maintain order and prevent the rise of destructive species, the primary voice explained. Throughout our history, we have contained over 300 developing civilizations that showed signs of violence and technological advancement. And what happened to those civilizations? Jack asked. They were guided into harmony with our values, the alien replied. Those who resisted were pacified. You mean they were conquered or destroyed? Susan said. Yes. The aliens' honesty was chilling. But none ever did what humanity has done. None showed us their own cruelty and violence so honestly, while demonstrating their capacity to move beyond it. None gathered peacefully in the face of destruction. The 7 council members conferred among themselves, speaking in sounds no human translation system could understand. Finally, the primary voice turned back to the cameras. We will depart your solar system, it announced. Earth will remain under observation for 100 years. At the end of that time, if humanity continues its trajectory toward peaceful cooperation and responsible development, you will be welcomed into the galactic community not as subjects but as equals. Around the world, people cheered and wept. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a chance. A chance humanity had earned not through force, but through honesty and hope. The invasion fleet departed as suddenly as it had arrived. But they left, behind a single vessel and a promise of continued communication. The remaining ship established an outpost on Earth's moon, a watching eye that would report back to the hegemony. 1 year later, Dr. Alan Price stood on the roof of the SETI facility in New Mexico, looking up at the stars with new eyes. Dr. Susan Bradley joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Do you think they'll be back sooner? He asked, taking one of the cups. Susan smiled. I'm counting on it. I've got about 50 more questions I want to ask them. The communication system they left us is amazing, Alan said. We've already learned so much from it. The system had arrived 3 months after the hegemony's departure, a small object that landed gently in the Nevada desert. Inside was a device of alien design, the plans for humanity's first faster-than-light communication system. Attached was a simple message. The conversation continues. Down below, in what had once been a lonely outpost searching for signs of alien life, the facility had expanded into the new Earth Hegemony Communication Center. Scientists from around the world worked there, studying the alien technology and exchanging messages with the lunar outpost. The world itself had changed. The United Earth Defense Force had become the United Earth Cooperative. The borders between nations remained open. The spirit of unity that had arisen in the face of extinction had not died away with the threat. It had grown stronger. Earth had been targeted by the most powerful empire in the galaxy, but a single warning had changed everything, not just for humanity, but perhaps for the galaxy itself. For the first time in its long history, the hegemony had encountered a species that made them question their own assumptions. As Alan and Susan watched the stars, a light streaked across the sky, a new ship arriving at the lunar outpost. The conversation was indeed continuing. And somewhere in Dallas, Billy Carter looked through his first telescope, dreaming of the day he would join that conversation in person.